Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Abdul, and today we're going to continue our reading of the Odyssey. So when we last read, we read about Aeolus, the wind god, who tried to help them get home, but the men opened the bag of bad winds and it took him back to Aeolus's island for the second time. Then their ships got bombarded by cannibals called the Lastrygonians. And here is where I made a mistake on the last video. So I said that after they got bombarded, they only had one ship and crew of 45 men survive. But that when they left Troy, they had 750 men. So I apologize for that. I made a mistake. All right. It's only 720 men. So I apologize. I guess I hadn't had my coffee yet. So they left Troy with 720 men, and now at that point in the epic, they only have one ship with 45 men left. And then we talked about how after that they landed on the island of Circe, all right, the witch goddess. And that's what we're going to read today. So it says, there Odysseus divides his men into two groups. Eurylochus leads one platoon to explore the island, while Odysseus stays behind on the ship with the remaining crew. So Eurylochus is like Odysseus's right-hand man. So, Odysseus is like, you're going to take these men because, I'm angry at you for opening up that bag of bad winds. You can go explore the island. So Eurylochus, his right-hand man, and half the men go to explore the island. In the wild wood, they found an open glade around a smooth stone house, the hall of Circe, and wolves and mountain lions lay there, mild in her soft spell, fed on her drug of evil. None would attack. Oh, it was strange, I tell you. But switching their long tails, they faced our men like hounds, who look up when their master comes with tidbits for them, as he will, from the table. Humbly those wolves and mountain lions with mighty paws fawned on our men, who met their yellow eyes and feared them. So Eurylochus and half of Odysseus's men get to Circe's palace, and in front are wolves and mountain lions. And at first, Odysseus and his men are afraid, just like you would be afraid if you encountered them in nature. However, these wolves and mountain lions are strange. They just, kind of treat Odysseus and his men, or they kind of act like dogs, just, pawning on them and, not really attacking them. And they thought that was very strange. But we're going to probably find out why they didn't attack very soon. In the entranceway, they stayed to listen. Inside her quiet house, they heard the goddess Circe. Low she sang in her beguiling voice, while on her loom she wove ambrosial fabric, sheer and bright, by that craft known to the goddesses of heaven. No one would speak until Pylades, the most faithful and likable of my officers, said. So they get up to her door and they can hear her singing, and she's sitting at her loom and she's weaving. And Pylades says, dear friends, no need for stealth. Here's a young weaver singing a pretty song to set the air a tingle on these lawns and paven courts. Goddess she is, or lady, shall we greet her? So reassured, they all cried out together, and she came swiftly to the shining doors to call them in. All but Eurylochus, who feared a snare, the innocents went after her. So Pylades says, she doesn't look too dangerous or too scary. I think we should go in. And at that point, Circe comes to the door and lets them in. Everybody went in except for Eurylochus, which is the leader. And you might find that kind of strange that the leader would stay back, but yet he would let his men go in. But he fears a snare, which means he fears a trick or a trap. So the leader stays at the door and watches what happens. And at first, everything looks pretty good. On thrones she seated them and lounging chairs, while she prepared a meal of cheese and barley and amber honey mixed with premium wine, adding her own vile pinch to make them lose desire or thought of their dear fatherland. So she sits them down on thrones. She gives them honey in the wine. She, gives them a meal of cheese and barley. But as she's making the wine, it says here she adds her own vile pinch. She adds something to the wine that's going to make them lose desire or thought of their dear fatherland. It's going to make them lazy and forgetful. That kind of sounds like the lotus. So she put a little bit of lotus in their wine. Scarce had they drunk when she flew after them with her long stick and shut them in a pigsty. Bodies, voices, heads, and bristles, all swinish now, though their minds were still unchanged. So squealing in they went, and Circe tossed them acorns, mast, and cornel berries, fodder for hogs who rut in slumber on the earth. So we said that she's a witch goddess. So as soon as they drank her wine, she got out her magic wand, did her little spell, and changed Odysseus's men to pigs, to swine. And then she shoved them in a pigsty and threw them some, food for pigs, like, acorns and things like that. Now it says here that they everything changed on their bodies except for their minds. So they still had their human minds, but their bodies were pigs. Well, if you think about it, that kind of explains the wolves and mountain lions that were outside her house and why they didn't attack. They probably didn't attack because they are humans that got transformed to wolves and mountain lions. So your locust, remember, was standing at the door and he's freaking out. Okay. He thinks that all of his men are pretty much dead and gone. Okay. They're pigs. Down to the ship, your locust came running to cry alarm. Foul magic doomed his men. But working with dry lips to speak a word, he could not. Being so shaken, blinding tears welled in his eyes, foreboding filled his heart. When we were frantic questioning him at last, we heard the tale. Our friends were gone. So your locust ran down to the ship and he's all out of breath and he's crying because he thinks that, his friends are gone, his friends are dead, well, pretty much dead. And eventually they get out of him that they got turned to pigs. And so, your locust tells Odysseus what has happened and begs him to sail away from Circe's island. Against this advice, however, Odysseus rushes to save his men from the enchantress. So remember, Odysseus is a good leader, or he shows good leadership here. Instead of leaving behind half his men, like 22, 23 men, he's going to go to Circe's hall and get them back. So remember, like he wouldn't even leave 3 men behind on the Lotus Eaters Island when they were, under the influence of the lotus plant. So he's certainly not going to leave 20 some men behind on this island. On the way to Circe's palace, he meets the god Hermes. Remember, Hermes is the messenger god, who gives him a magical plant called moly to protect him from Circe's power. Still, Hermes warns Odysseus that he must make the goddess swear that she will play no witches' tricks. Armed with the moly and Hermes' warning, Odysseus arrives at Circe's palace. So Hermes really helps Odysseus here. He says, Odysseus, you have to eat this moly. And at first, Odysseus is like, no, I'm not going to eat that. That's poison. Are you trying to kill me? And Hermes says, look, this is the only way to protect yourself from her spells. If you eat this, she won't be able to turn you in to any kind of animal. So reluctantly, Odysseus eats the moly. And then Hermes says, look, I know you want to get your men back, but you have to make sure you do a few things first. Make sure that you get Circe to promise you that she's not going to do any more of her magic tricks. Because once a goddess promises something, she has to stick with it. Okay, she has to go with it. And he says, look, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to ask for your men back. She will give you your men back, but she's going to make you sleep with her first. And I know you're thinking, well, he was already with a goddess because he was with Calypso. However, if you're looking at chronological order on our timeline, what happened first, second, and third, and so on, all right, this is the first time that he's actually going to be with a goddess. But Hermes warns him, okay? He says, you can't say no to a goddess. If she asks you to do something, you must do it. So he really has no choice if he wants to get his men back. Circe gives Odysseus a magic drink, but it does not affect him, and he threatens to kill her with his sword. So, everything looks just the way it was before. She welcomes Odysseus in, she sits him on a throne, she gives him some cheese, the wine with the lotus in it, and he drinks it, and nothing happens. And Circe is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Everybody who has drank this wine has, been affected by my magic and turned into something. So she's completely shocked. So he takes out his sword and he threatens her life. And our book cuts out a lot of stuff here, so I'm going to stop reading from the screen for a second. So he says to her, Circe, I want my men back to men. And just like Hermes said, she says, fine, you can have your men back, but only after you take me to bed, only after, you have sex with me. So Odysseus does what the goddess wants, and they go off and they do their thing. When they're done, Odysseus is sitting at the table, and Circe has prepared this huge meal for him. But Odysseus refuses to eat. And she's like, Odysseus, why are you not eating? Like I told you, I would do no more magic tricks. There's nothing bad in this food. And he says, Circe, what kind of leader would I be if I leave my men to be pigs and I sit here and enjoy this meal? So she goes over to the pigsty, she takes out her magic wand, and she transforms all of Odysseus's men back to men. And they have a very tearful reunion. You'll like this scene in the movie because the first thing the guys check for is to make sure everything under the belt is still good to go. So that'll be a good laugh when you see that in the movie. So Circe then tells Odysseus, go get the rest of your men from the ship and stay here for a while. So Odysseus goes back down to the ship and he says, hey guys, so Eurylochus is down there and everybody else. And he says, come on, our men are back to men. And, we're going to stay here for a while. Circe has invited us to stay. Now, Eurylochus, that, Odysseus's right-hand man, the second in charge, is going to go against Odysseus's good advice twice in this epic. And here's the first time. He says, no, 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 no. Don't you listen to Odysseus. Remember all the men that followed him into the Cyclops' cave? Did they all make it out alive? He says, I saw Circe. I saw what she did to our men. All right. I think she's going to do more harm. Do not listen to Odysseus. Now, Odysseus, being the leader, being the king of Ithaca, he is furiated. He's so frustrated that Eurylochus would speak bad about him and go against him. He takes out his sword and he's ready to kill him there. But the rest of the men stop him and say, look, if he doesn't want to go, he can stay on the ship by himself, but we'll follow you. However, eventually Odysseus and all of his men, including Eurylochus, go back to Circe's palace. And they stay with her for 1 year. All right, a whole year they stay with Circe. After the year, though, Odysseus finally begs her to let them go home. She replies that they must first visit the land of the dead and hear a prophecy from the ghost of Tiresias. So after the year, he's like, Odysseus says to Circe, I think it's time to go. And she's like, I'm not holding you captive. You are free to go whenever you want. And he says, well, can you help me? Give me some guidance. How do I get to Ithaca? And she says, sadly, the only thing that I know, or the only person I know that can help you, is Tiresias. And Odysseus says, I can't see Tiresias. Tiresias is dead. And she says, I know. So in order to see him, you must go to the land of the dead, or the underworld, hell, Hades, whatever you want to call it. So even though Odysseus is happy that, He's getting off of Circe's island. He's not happy and he's not looking forward to where he has to go next, the land of the dead. And we'll hear more about that in our next reading.